So good evening, everyone. I'm Rich Kelsky from the Forestry Association. With me tonight are Betsy McShane, Mike Zsoldos, and John Hooven, who are our presenters for this evening. They're going to be presenting on the Joint Chiefs Pinelands Landscape Restoration Project. And I'm going to begin with a brief PowerPoint and introductions, and then Betsy will take over from there. So tonight we're going to be discussing the Joint Chiefs Pinelands Landscape Restoration Project, as I indicated, wildfire, water, habitats, and probably 3 or 4 other subjects that I didn't list. Tonight's presenters are Betsy McShane. She is the New Jersey State Biologist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, probably known to you as NRCS. Michael Zsoldos, the Assistant Regional Forester of the New Jersey Forest Service, and John Hooven, who's the forester for Cape Atlantic Conservation District. Betsy has a long career with NRCS. She joined NRCS in 1998 and came back to her home state of New Jersey, I believe, in 2002. Mike has been with the Forest Service for 7 years, and John Hooven began his forestry career as a second career when he fell in love with forests and forestry by attending the Woodland Stewards program in 2015, John, is that correct? And he went back to school, obtained his degree, joined the SAF, worked in a variety of places, and is now back in Jersey as well. I wanted to thank last month's presenters, Andy Bennett and Dylan Borger. They did a great job on invasive species and fighting invasive species and how to manage them. And that presentation is up on our YouTube page now, so you can watch it. I had a couple of requests from people asking when it would be posted. It was posted a couple of weeks ago, so feel free to take a look at it and any of our other previous presentations. We're here every third Thursday of the month. And next month, we have a special guest, Ethan Tapper. I call him a celebrity forester. Ethan just published his first book, and he'll be speaking about that and other things forestry on November 21st. There's a QR code on the screen. If you have your phone handy, you can snap a picture of it or copy the link. It's not open yet on the website because I didn't want to confuse it with tonight's presentation, but it will be open tomorrow. Again, you can always watch our videos on the YouTube channel. And just a little summary for the Forestry Association. We do a lot of different things for outreach in the state of New Jersey. We manage this program, of course, the Walk in the Woods program, the Woodland Stewards program, and several other endeavors. We have an annual meeting coming up in March, which we hope you will all attend. If you're not a member of the association, we would really appreciate you joining. We do disclaim liability for these presentations because obviously we can't control what the presenter says, nor is that an opinion of the association. So just want you to point that out to you. And but again, these programs are for information only. And without further ado, we will begin with Betsy.
All right. You don't mind I'm going to switch my display again. And if you let me know if it looks okay on your end, Rich.
That's it.
Great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Good evening, everyone. Like Rich mentioned, I'm Betsy McShane, and I'm the state biologist for NRCS, which is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I wanted to thank the New Jersey Forestry Association for inviting me to present tonight and talk about our project that we have been working on for the last couple of years. I'm going to turn off my camera just to preserve my bandwidth a little bit. Actually, maybe I'll just leave it on and we can go. So like Rich mentioned, I've been working for NRCS since 1998, and I started my career in Rhode Island working on salt marsh restoration projects. And I was able to transfer to New Jersey in 2002 And I've had a statewide position since then, and I've worked in various offices, starting in Clinton and Hunterdon County, and then I was in our Hamilton office in Atlantic County. My home base now is in our Woodstown Service Center, and I live in Gloucester County, down in Swedesboro, exit 2 off the Turnpike. But I do work throughout the state. And I just wanted to talk to you tonight a little bit about some of the programs that our agency offers, and to give you a little bit of history of NRCS and who we are, and our history of working in conservation planning, and some of the ways that we work with landowners to provide technical assistance and conservation planning, and some of the funding assistance that we offer. And in particular, I wanted to talk about our Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership. So what is the Natural Resources Conservation Service? Hopefully some of you have heard of us, but we're one of those quiet agencies that sometimes works in the background, and not a lot of people are familiar with what we do on a daily basis. So I just wanted to share a little bit of information about NRCS. We are the lead technical agency of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we work with customers to help them reduce erosion, protect wildlife, promote good land use, and to preserve our nation's natural resources. And our customers that I mentioned, those are private landowners, farmers, ranchers, and forest owners. And the natural resources that we're talking about soil, water, air, plants, animals, energy, all of the basic natural resources. A little bit of our agency's history, it's closely tied to the Dust Bowl days of the 1930s. And just as a reminder of our history, the Dust Bowl occurred as a combination of events. With the industrialization of farming came the end of the horse and plow, and now tractors were used. And with the use of tractors, this enabled a huge increase in the number of acres that were brought into farming. At the same time as this was happening, we experienced a period of prolonged drought, and that resulted in the Dust Bowls. The Dust Bowl. And at the same time, our country was experiencing the Great Depression. Many farmers were moving from the east, from our area, out to the Midwest and West, to the breadbasket of the country. And that's where they were working for the first time with really fragile soils. And with a change of crop demands and that prolonged drought, the Dust Bowl occurred. And it was described as a national menace. It was really quite an issue on all different levels. Huge dust clouds carried soil hundreds of miles all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And Hugh Hammond Bennett, which is the father of soil conservation, he took advantage of the timing of some of these dust storms that were reaching Washington, D.C. at the same time he was testifying to Congress about the menace of soil erosion. This is around the time of FDR's New Deal, and the Civilian Conservation Corps was developed. And around that time, Hugh Hammond Bennett convinced Congress to establish the Soil Erosion Service in 1933. And at that time, it was part of the Department of Interior. Later, this was converted to the Soil Conservation Service under Roosevelt. And that occurred in 1935. And then eventually we recognized that it wasn't just soil as the only resource that we were working with and conserving. And in the mid 1990s, our agency underwent a name change to become the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So what Hugh Hammond Bennett wanted to do was to give examples of how farmers and ranchers could implement conservation practices on their properties to reduce soil loss. And he implemented displays or farms that had some of these practices that other farmers from the region could come and take a look at what to do and how to do it. And his goal really was to take care of the land so that it would take care of you. And this is one of the demonstration farms that was developed. And this is an example of farming on a contour to reduce erosion. Now, NRCS has always worked with partners closely. our enabling legislation only allows us to work in counties that there's a local soil conservation district. And these conservation districts are meant to be members of the community that know the most important needs of their community and will target the federal dollars to address those needs. So they're basically, they steer our work in states and counties. And there's about 3,000 of these conservation districts across the country, and they're still active here in New Jersey. And our field offices are often co-located with the soil conservation districts. Our state office is located in Hamilton Square now. Some of you may have remembered that it used to be in Somerset, but we've recently moved to Hamilton Square, so it's nice and central. And we have field offices in 6 different locations in New Jersey, in Hackettstown, Frenchtown, Freehold, Columbus, Woodstown, and Vineland. We also have a technical support office in Hamilton. That's basically a regional soils office. And we also have a plants materials center in Cape May Courthouse, which is basically a working farm that we use to develop new vegetation that can be used in conservation practices. And the Plants Materials Center in Cape May actually services most of the Atlantic Coast region. So let's talk about some of the technical assistance that I mentioned before, that NRCS is the lead technical agency of the USDA. And what we do is provide technical assistance free of charge to landowners and producers across the country. And we're not a regulatory agency. We basically only go where we're invited. And we provide technical assistance in soils, wildlife, engineering, pollinator habitat, wetlands, forestry, grazing, organic farming, just to name a few of the things that we, types of technical assistance we provide. And we have general planners in our field offices. And in addition to those general planners, we have specialists, like our engineers, our soil scientists, our irrigation specialists. I'm a wildlife biologist. And really, we are working across the state throughout, even though New Jersey is a small state, we have quite a diversity of both land cover and land uses. The number of different types of farming right here in New Jersey is quite extensive, and we work in all those different settings. But really, the bread and butter of our work is developing conservation plans with landowners. And to develop a conservation plan, a trained conservation planner will work with you to make a plan to address your resource concerns. And really, how do we do that? We walk the farm. We discuss with the farmers what their goals are. We ask them to point out trouble spots on their property that they need some assistance with. And as we walk and talk and get to know the landscape, we can point out things that we see as areas of improvements or things that we can help them with. And then based on what the land manager's goals are, we develop what we call a conservation plan, which outlines those best management practices, or what we call conservation practices that can be implemented on the property. And what are some of these conservation practices? They're everything from conservation crop rotation, residue management, riparian forest buffers, fencing, pasture and hayland planting, field borders. There's structural practices like agricultural chemical handling facilities. There's roughly 200 different conservation practices that we routinely implement in New Jersey. And we work with livestock, irrigation on vegetables and grain farms. And this is a traditional erosion practice, like a grassed waterway, which helps to reduce erosion off of crop fields and protects water quality. And after we make all these recommendations of what landowners can do and put together their conservation plan, we have conservation programs that are funded through the federal Farm Bill that can be used to help pay for the practices that we've recommended. So there's a whole conservation program alphabet soup. There's the CIG, EQIP, WRE, CSP, ASAP. It can get overwhelming, but really what we recommend is that the NRCS staff can help you determine what the best funding opportunities are for your project. So if you determine what practices you'd like to implement, we'll work with you to figure out which program is the best fit for your property. But there is one program that's really the probably most commonly used in New Jersey, and it's called the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And I wanted to highlight EQIP today because it's what we typically use when we're working with forest landowners to implement practices. So with EQIP, it's a program that provides assistance to install and maintain conservation practices that sustain food and fiber production. So basically, we're looking at to be on an active farm, and that includes forest land in the definition. And while we're doing that, we're enhancing soil, water, and related natural resources. And we're assisting producers to make beneficial changes to their production systems. And just about some of the basic requirements of EQIP, the forestry is an eligible land use of the program. Owners of forest land or land capable of growing trees. So maybe it's not a forest now, but you're planning on planting a forest, planting trees to do that. They are eligible participants. And applicants must have a forestry management plan or stewardship plan to be eligible to apply in most cases. There are some program specifics where that's not a requirement, but that's usually the best place to start. Somebody who already has a forestry management in place and they're getting ready to implement those practices. I would also say that we do have funds available for landowners to get a forest management plan written. We can help pay for that cost. And we work with a list of certified foresters that have gone through our training and program information, and they've agreed to write that plan according to our specifications. And if you use one of those foresters, you can apply to get funds to have that forestry management plan written. There are some basic program eligibility requirements that there are some adjusted gross income provisions. If you make over a certain amount of funds, you wouldn't be eligible for the program. Not funds, your income is over a certain amount. You have to be in compliance with the highly erodible lands and wetlands conservation compliance provisions of the Farm Bill. And you have to work with our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, to have your records in place. And this is all stuff that our local field office staff can help you through.
Betsy, just a question.
Sure.
That designation is a technical service provider?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
So just as a point, there's a list of approved foresters in the state of New Jersey, but not all of them are technical service providers for the NRCS. So it has to be prepared by a technical service provider. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep, those technical service providers, it's another acronym that TSPs, those are the foresters that have agreed to write the plan according to our specifications and follow our outline. And we have vetted them to make sure that they meet basic requirements. And if you use one of those foresters, we'll help to pay to have that plan written. Thanks for that clarification, Rich. Sure. And okay, so some of the practices that we are implementing on forestry in forestry projects are things like brush management, tree shrub site prep, forest stand improvement, also known as TSI, commonly known as TSI, tree and shrub establishment, prescribed burning, fuel breaks, fire breaks. These are all some of our conservation practices that are typically used on forest lands. And payments are flat rates based on an acreage completed, not necessarily the cost. We have a payment guidance that has been developed that has an average cost that was developed for each of those conservation practices. And landowners will know ahead of time how much money has been set aside in their contract. And when they do the work, we'll go out and certify that it has been completed according to our specifications. And then we will make that reimbursement. We will pay them for the work that was done. And landowners have to maintain it for the practice lifespan. And each practice has its own lifespan. And that basically says, if you install this practice according to our specifications, we anticipate that it will remain there or will stand for a certain amount of time. For example, if you install a fence according to our specifications, we'll sign off on it and it should last 10 years. The lifespan of fence is 10 years. So each practice has a lifespan. All right, so here, let's look at some of these conservation practices in action. This is a picture of a prescribed burn, and NRCS in New Jersey has a long history of partnering with the New Jersey Forest Fire Service to conduct controlled burns. They have a unique skill set that we don't have on staff. And it's also for landowners that don't want to do the work themselves. They can partner with the Forest Fire Service to implement that conservation practice for us. And this is a great tool in forest land, but also in grassland habitat too, to keep things in an early successional state. When we're doing prescribed burning in the forested setting, we often have to do some mechanical treatment of that forest before it's in a condition that is suitable for burning. There may just be too much woody debris, woody material to do a burn safely. So we often work with landowners, especially in the Pine Barrens, to first do mechanical removal, such as some thinning or brush management, installing those fuel breaks and fire breaks. And then once that work has all been done, then we can go ahead and do the prescribed burn. One thing that is unique to the Pine Barrens is the idea of having Pine Barren savanna habitat within the forested landscape. So it's kind of something that you have to retrain your brain that the forested lands of the Pine Barrens would have at one time had large, vast areas of early successional or grassland habitat. NRCS has been doing work like this for several years, and we work with private landowners, hunt clubs, nonprofit organizations to get that mechanical removal to create some of these areas. Not often do we do seeding in those areas. It's usually not necessary. This is in a case where the landowners, a hunting club, chose to do some seeding of native warm season grasses. And then the area is managed routinely. This is that same site with repeated prescribed burns. We also do manage for rare communities, rare plant communities like Atlantic white cedar. And what I wanted to talk about next is one way that we're using our EQIC dollars in New Jersey on a specific partnership called the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership. And this is a USDA initiative. And the two chiefs that we're talking about in the Joint Chiefs are the chief of the USDA's Forest Service and the chief of the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. And the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership Program, which I'll probably just refer to as Joint Chiefs because it's quite the long name. It's working to improve the health and resilience of forest landscapes across the National Forest System land and state, tribal, and private lands. And the Forest Service works with the Federal Forest Service lands, but also partners with states to work on state land. So in New Jersey, we don't have federal forest service land within the Pine Barrens. So we're partnering with various departments of the state government to implement those programs. Now, New Jersey's or NRCS has a rare authority to work on private lands. There aren't many federal agencies that have the authority to work on private lands, but that's what we do. That's our history. So by partnering these two agencies together, we can cover a lot of ground. Oops. So the Joint Chiefs Restoration Partnership, it enables NRCS and the Forest Service to collaborate with agricultural producers and forest landowners at a large scale. And the goal is to restore healthy forest ecosystems by reducing wildfire threats, protecting water quality and supply, improve wildlife habitat for at-risk species. And these are 3-year projects, and we apply targeted forest management practices on their land, such as thinning, hazardous fuel treatments, fire breaks, and other systems to meet unique forestry challenges in the area. Now, this slide shows all of the projects nationally funded through the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership through 2023. 10 more were added in 2024, bringing the total to 134 different projects. And this is the first, and that was the year that New Jersey was funded in 2023. And this is the first Joint Chiefs project in New Jersey, and there really aren't many in the Northeast in general. So this was a priority project, especially for the Forest Service. And the proposal that we put together was in partnership with the New Jersey Audubon Society and various agencies within DEP, including Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Forestry, Forest Service, and the Forest Fire Service. And in our proposal, this is the basic premise of our proposal, which was entitled New Jersey Pine Barrens Restoration. And with the idea that New Jersey pine barrens are characterized by low, dense forests of pine and oak, ribbons of cedar and hardwood swamps bordering drainage courses, pitch pine lowlands, and bogs and marshes that create a vegetative mosaic. And it has been recognized as a nationally and internationally important ecological region. The Pine Barrens is a fire-adapted forest ecosystem that depends on wildfire for vegetative reproduction and the control of fuel buildup. And notably, this forest community is one of the most hazardous wildland fuel types in the country. So our goal really was to improve the health and resilience of the forest landscapes across both public and private lands within the UNESCO designated Biolands Biosphere region, the Pinelands and also known as the Pinelands National Reserve, by first developing landscape level fireshed planning areas in coordination with the USDA's Forest Service's development and application of the fireshed registry methods. And then next, we're going to implement forestry management activities on both state and private lands for the purposes of reducing wildfire risk in municipal watersheds and the wildland urban interface, implementing carbon defense activities, improving habitat for T&E species, and mitigating the effects of southern pine beetle. And the third thing we're planning on doing is rolling out an outreach program to promote public awareness and facilitate program participation. So really the idea was that we would get those fireshed plans, which would help direct us to the areas of greatest need. And then we would do public outreach based on the fireshed planning and then start implementing on the ground work through our programs. And here's just a look at the area that we designated to be within our Joint Chiefs area. And you'll see that there's a combination of both public and private land. The red areas were NRCS projects that were ready to go. They were shovel-ready projects that were just waiting for additional funding. And you'll see that the green area is all the state land and publicly owned land that needs work as well. And the Forest Service funds could be directed to work on those lands. But we were also looking at things like overburdened communities. And this could be what we refer to as our historically underserved communities by our agency, areas that we haven't necessarily done the best job of reaching the people in the greatest need. And those could be some based on income, minority populations, limited English, health issues that could be impacted by wildfires. So if you think about all of the 55 and older and elderly communities along the eastern edge of our area. These are all people that if there was catastrophic fire would be at the greatest risk. So those were some of the ways that we prioritized our restoration area. And then when you overlap that with the actual fire hazard potential, you can really see why there's a safety need and how this work is overlapping, this high risk areas overlapping with a lot of those overburdened communities that we talked about in the previous slide. So there is a great risk and a great need. And in doing this work, we're not just addressing the safety needs and definitely want to prevent loss of life and property, but there's also so many other benefits of doing this forestry work. There are 43 animal species that are classified as threatened and endangered by the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife's Endangered Non-Game Species Program that occur within this area. Of these species, 28 or 65% are birds, and 16 are birds of forested, upland, scrub, shrub, early successional, and grassland habitat. So not just your forest birds. Our focus also lies within the important North-South Atlantic Flyway that has been designated according to the important bird area criteria as a significant migrant stopover location, as well as important breeding area. And according to the New Jersey State Wildlife Action Plan that was written in 2018 and is currently being updated, forest management such as forest thinning, seed tree harvest, and the use of prescribed fire in this region would improve habitat for corn snake, red-headed woodpecker, pine barrens gentian, and prairie warbler, northern bobwhite, which is also an initiative of NRCS. And some of these species of greatest conservation need. Any work that we do in Atlantic white cedar bogs would also benefit timber rattlesnake, pine barrens tree frog, Hensel's hairstreak, and which is a rare butterfly whose larvae feed exclusively on Atlantic white cedar. There's also the black-throated green warbler, swamp pink, which is a federally listed plant species, curly grass fern, fringed orchids, and forestry management work will dovetail into the habitat restoration efforts of our existing Working Lands for Wildlife initiative for pine barren savanna habitat. So there's a great conservation
Betsy,
need.
I see a question in the chat. It
Okay.
says, where can we obtain a list of threatened and endangered species?
Okay,
And
so there's
I guess that we're talking maybe within and without this area. So
yeah. So in general, a great place to see the listed species is the state's endangered non-game species maintains a list of wildlife species that are threatened and endangered in New Jersey. And the state's natural heritage program maintains a list of TNE plant species. So if you wanted to find what species are located in this area or on your property, you could always get a natural heritage database. They have a request form that you can send in, and they will send you a list of rare species that occur in your project area or on your property. And there's also something called the Landscape Project, which is a tool developed by the Endangered Non-Game Species, and it's a simple GIS mapping tool. There's a website, NJGeoWeb, that you don't need any specialized GIS software to use, and it's a great tool. You can just put in your address, and one of the choices of data that you can pull up is that Landscape Project, and that will tell you the TNE species that are located on your property. So I hope that helps and address the question.
And I also think that probably if you have a forest management plan or a stewardship plan, that would be listed as a component of the plan.
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. The foresters are required to include, to get that plan approved, they are required to get those natural heritage database reports and include that in their plan. So yeah, and I always encourage landowners that I work with, If you have a particular goal of enhancing your property for wildlife habitat, make sure that when the forester is on site to do their inventory and evaluation of your property, walk with them and make sure that they know what your goals are. That sometimes if there's a TNE species, it's an inclination of the forester just to show the area and avoid the impact, stay away from it. But sometimes you can actually do practices that will benefit these species. And that's usually what we're doing through our programs. So I would encourage you to make sure that your forester knows what your goals are. And if you'd like to do additional work that could benefit these species, that you're doing it. And maybe through our equip program. All right. And looking at this map of the region, you can see the potential for addressing needed management on state land and land preserved by our NGO partners. There's a great potential of area that needs treatment, and within and outside of the state land, those are those private landowners that NRCS is working with, and we're connecting these habitats together. So the one thing that we don't work on through these programs is on military bases or other federal lands. And there are just so many other planning and strategy documents that have already been developed and are out there that this initiative is in alignment with. So this is just a list of all of the different organizations that have either set their, New Jersey State Forestry Action Plans or Atlantic White Cedar Restoration Strategy, to things like the Delaware River Watershed Initiatives, Kirkwood-Cohansey Cluster Action Plan, or even our local working group priorities. All of these plans are out there, and people saw that as a need, and this program is the program that's actually implementing the on-the-ground practices that these plans are calling for. So we're trying to get the work done. That rather than having plans sit on a shelf, we're trying to use them and implement the recommendations through this initiative. And just some basic things to remember that I've already highlighted, but just to wrap things up and sum it up, here's some useful remembers that NRCS technical assistance is free. You don't necessarily need to be enrolled in one of our programs to receive our technical assistance. We can come to your property and make those recommendations, walk the property with you and point things out, and all that information plus mapping information like our soil surveys. That's all technical information that's free to landowners. And that includes our conservation planning and technical assistance. And really our goal is to identify resource concerns, provide alternatives for solving those problems, and develop a timeline for implementation in your conservation plan. And then our conservation program application assistance, we talked about reviewing those eligibility rules and determining which program is the best fit for your operation. And our field offices can help you with both of these. And they can process multiple applications at once for your property. You may have differing goals and differing programs that can help reach those goals. We do take applications at any time for our programs, either for our technical assistance or our program funding, but we do set batching dates. So come October 18th, which is just around the corner, as tomorrow is, we'll be looking at all the applications that we've received up until this point, and putting them through a ranking process to see which projects have the greatest bang for the buck. And depending on how much funds we have available, we will fund our the highest ranked projects. So these funds are competitive. This ranking period is, for most programs, is held during the fall and winter. And like I said, this year it's October 18th. And the ranking is based on how the objectives meet both national, state, and local concerns. And there's also a cost efficiency component to it. If you don't make that October 18th deadline for application, that's fine. We can start working on applications for next year. Or if more funds become available for this year, you'll be ready to go. You'll have your project all thought out, and you'll have time to think about what it is that you want to do on your property. So, and there is no minimum size or farm income to be eligible for the programs. And like I said before, this is voluntary. We're not a regulatory agency. And what is in your plans remains private. Just because it's part of a federal contract doesn't mean that we share the information with anyone. And we wouldn't do that without your consent. And if you wanted to find out more about our programs, you can always visit our website or stop in and check with one of our local service centers. Like I mentioned before, we have offices in Hackettstown, Frenchtown, Freehold, Columbus, Woodstown, and Vineland. And you can see on this slide which counties each of those offices cover. So with that, thank you
Betsy,
very much.
just a couple of things, and then we'll get
Okay.
Mike to take over the helm.
Okay.
And John, if you have anything to chime in on, but as far as plans go, in other words, getting paid some piece of your plan cost, that is not part of the competitive process, right? That's funded.
So traditionally, so you're talking about the forestry management plans that are written by TSPs,
Right.
our technical service providers. That was always first come, first serve. This year there may be competition for it just because we have so many applications for that. But yeah, traditionally we have just started signing those contracts as the applications come in. So yeah, that's something that we'll have to look at for this year.
And by the way, I was in the Hackettstown office today, and everybody's really nice. So, don't be afraid out there to go in and talk to people, because you can get a ton of information, and everybody's very happy to provide it and to help you with the application process. And there's still another day to get applications in, and
Yeah,
you can
sure.
do it, and you can do it. And they will help you do it. So
Right.
this is, this, like Betsy said, this is not a regulatory agency. This is an agency seeking to work with you. And just one other point, and then we'll shift over, is that you were speaking here about the Joint Chiefs Restoration Project, but you're also speaking generally about NRCS funding and assistance throughout the state as being available. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So for the Joint Chiefs, it's an initiative, but the both agencies use current programs that they have to fund it. So it is just another way that we're using EQIP dollars in New Jersey. Right. So all the general information that's applicable to EQIP is applicable to people that are applying for Joint Chiefs. Basically, what we've done is set aside a pot of money from our EQIP dollars specifically for this initiative.
Got it.
So you
Okay,
won't
so
be
if you want to sign off there, we'll hold the questions that are in the Q&A. Somebody asked, what is the deadline? The deadline for this year is tomorrow.
For now, yeah, unless we have, sometimes we do, if more funds are available than projects, we will open it up to a second round of applications. But we're already processing our 2025 applications right now.
Right. It's a bit of a process. There's forms to fill out, but like I said, the people are really nice. They will help you. If you want to get down there tomorrow, they will do it. Sorry, those people in the office. I send everybody your way. Anyway, if you want to unshare, and we'll bring Mike on. Mike?
There we are. Yeah. I too will stop sharing my my video once I pull up my screen. I live in the Pinelands, so the internet quality isn't always the best. But let me stop sharing my video and we'll go to screen here. Entire screen. Oh, sorry, everyone. This is being. Here we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Just out of curiosity, if you're comfortable with it, if you have a forest stewardship plan or woodland management plan, just maybe in the chat, put what county you're coming from. I think it would be interesting to see where you folks are all coming from, but I'm Mike Zsoldos. I'm the Assistant Regional State Forester for the Southern Region Private Lands. I cover everywhere from Camden and Atlantic County south, and talk to you a little bit about forest stewardship tonight from the New Jersey Forest Service perspective. So in 2010, the new forest stewardship regulations were enacted, but those rules were not adopted until 2017. The new forest stewardship guidelines do meet the federal forest stewardship guidelines, and because of that, that allows you to be eligible for the EQIP funds. Also, the biggest change to the new forest stewardship regulations were you're no longer required to derive income from your forest products to be eligible for farmland assessment, which in the Pinelands region, it's very beneficial because a lot of the activity that needs to be done doesn't always derive income, but you can still be eligible for farmland assessment now. This is just a list of our current regulations or minimum requirements for forest stewardship on the right, and on the left here, we have some of the changes to forest stewardship. And one of the biggest changes folks were looking to make is the desired future conditions and your goals to reach those desired conditions. We really wanted to have foresters and landowners not only think about, okay, I'm managing my forest for a farmland assessment, but we want them to think about, where is my forest right now? Where do I see it in 10 years? And how can I get there? And what measurements will I take over the course of those 10 years to make sure I'm on track to get my forest to the point I want it to be? A lot of folks get concerned that maybe they're not meeting their objectives, and realistically, as long as you're bobbing and weaving with your activities and meeting, the basic requirements of your plan, it's okay not to meet those objectives as long as you're moving in the right direction. So the basic requirements for forest stewardship is to have 5 acres of forested land, at least 10% canopy cover, or is capable of achieving that 10% canopy cover, and that you're consistently managing your land under an approved plan. The Forest Service's role is we receive the plans, we review the plans, we work with the consulting foresters, making sure that all of the requirements are met. Betsy was talking about the NHR endangered species list. That is one of the requirements for a forest stewardship plan. So we work with the foresters to make sure that the prescriptions they're planning doesn't risk any threatened and endangered species, to make sure that we're not creating any unforeseen problems. We review and approve the farmland assessment applications each year. We report to the local tax assessors of folks who are enrolled in the program and their status with us. And then a big part of what we do is we perform compliance inspections every 3 to 5 years. We really think these are important, especially for new landowners, to get out there, have the conversation with them, what they're doing, what limitations they're facing, and how they can better manage their forest through the course of their plan. Specifically in the Pinelands region, the benefit of forest stewardship is we have a memorandum of agreement with the Pinelands Commission that any new forest stewardship plan that we receive, we submit to the Pinelands Commission and review jointly to ensure that everything in their comprehensive management plan is being followed. So if you don't have a forest stewardship plan, this falls solely on the landowner to make sure that the landowner and the forester, that their plan is following all the rules within the comprehensive management plan. The forest stewardship, this way, myself or Brian in the central region will work with the Pinelands to make sure that the plan is meeting those requirements, so you don't have to submit a formal application to the Pinelands. There are exempted activities, which include tree thinning, tree harvesting, and prescribed fire. As long as you're less than 5 acres a year of tree thinning or less than 5 cords harvested a year, you won't require additional permitting from the Pinelands Commission. But if you go through the forest stewardship process, even if it is above those exempt thresholds, this way you'll get your certificate of filing and you'll be able to move through with getting your additional permits from municipalities. Yeah, I have listed here the administrative code if you wanted to look and see the exact verbiage for the exempted activities, but most of the consulting foresters are very aware of those and are very good at putting them into the plans if that's the route you're taking. This is just a little sheet of the properties that are enrolled in either forest stewardship or woodland management in the Pinelands region. So yeah, you see we have over 70,000 acres of land that's enrolled in some type of forest management. And you can see how widely dispersed they are throughout the Pinelands, and those big gaps where you don't see private lands is mostly because it's state lands. And our next slide, you will see that this is an overlay of all state-owned land, and then you also still have the private lands there. So you can see how connected the state land forest and private lands forests are, which is why this Joint Chiefs initiative is really great, because it gives the opportunity for state lands and private landowners to integrate some of their activities and really benefit the landscape on a whole. These are just some different qualifying activities for forest stewardship. I'll get into each one of them a little more. So most folks in the Pinelands are doing some form of thinning. I mean, the density is extremely high in most of the Pinelands region, and this is going to help reduce density and really improve the health of your forest. Reforestation is another big activity, possibly one of my favorite activities for forest stewardship. I really enjoy seeing folks who either buy a piece of ground or maybe they're transitioning away from farming and they're looking to see, what do I do with my field now? And these are some pictures of private landowners who have implemented different reforestation efforts, and you can see having this new forest is really important on the landscape, because we don't have much of it in the state. Prescribed burning is obviously another very important activity, especially in the Pinelands region. This is a site that we burned here in Atlantic County this year, and I was lucky enough to assist New Jersey Forest Fire Service with this burn. I went back in August to take a look and see how it was looking. So on the left here, you can see the side of the trail that we had not burned. So that really shows you the density that we were dealing with. And on the right side is this photo, just several months later. And this was a really intense burn. I mean, we had flames 25, 30 feet touching the canopy tops. So it was a really intense fire, but you can see after a little bit of growing season, you could hardly tell the difference if in a few years when those fire scars go away, you'll hardly be able to tell that anyone was even there. But this makes for a much safer forest, because if we have a wildfire come through this area, now those fuels have been burned and it's a lot less likely to carry through this area, and it could potentially be a point for New Jersey Forest Fire Service to hold a wildfire if we have one in this area. These are some videos or pictures of that day. I believe 2 of these are videos as well. Let's see if they play for us. I just thought it would be neat to show you guys some live action of prescribed fire and what it looks like as we're burning that day. A lot of folks get very concerned with having prescribed fire on their property, but what I will say is the New Jersey Forest Fire folks are great at what they do. They take their job very seriously, and they want to go home at the end of the day and know that they made the forest a safer place. So they're certainly not going to be burning anything that they don't feel comfortable with, that they can control. They come out to your site and they will do an evaluation and see if they can burn your property, if there's intermediate treatments that need to be done before they can burn your property, that would need to be submitted to the New Jersey Forest Fire Service through a prescribed burn application. Their deadline is October 15th for prescribed burn applications. But I know if you work closely with your district warden, they'll work with you to see if they can fit you in for the year. They do a lot of burning when conditions are appropriate. So it's somewhat difficult to get onto private lands, but if you work with your division warden, they'll work with you and be realistic with you if they can get to you, if they can't get to you, and when they can. So I would say reach out to your district wardens and find out if it's feasible for your property. You know, we're very dry right now, so I know when I'm in the office, those guys are kind of running around like crazy, answering phone calls and running out in their brush trucks and putting out fires. There's been quite a few smaller fires right now, so hopefully we don't get anything major in the next several weeks before we get some relief with the rain. Invasive species control is another really important activity, not so much in the Pinelands region, but elsewhere in the state. You can see down here on the bottom left, this is a photo from Dylan, and this is not two images put together. This is an image of where they did work on the land on the right, and the land on the left is a different landowner, and they're not working there. So the importance of controlling non-native invasive tree species is very important because it's better for our natural trees, better for our natural wildlife. It's just a cleaner and healthier environment. I have invasive species control here, and these two photos are focused more on different forest pests. On the left is an aerial image of what southern pine beetle attacks or outbreaks could look like, where you can see the small pocket of dead trees and then another small pocket of brown. And as it's turning into yellow, you can see that pine beetle just moving along, just consuming a lot of pine tree in its path. So the best way to mitigate pine beetle damage is by thinning your forests. Density plays a huge role in where pine beetles attack and how much of an area they're able to consume before they're kind of stopped. The right here is something new we're dealing with. Again, not so much in the Pinelands region, but this is beech leaf disease, and it's not a very good outlook at the moment. You can see these dark bands on the underside of the beech leaf. It's a nematode that's infecting these trees. And right now, there are no forest-wide control. Individually, there's some promise in controlling, but as a forest-wide landscape, it's nearly impossible to treat each and every individual tree. So hopefully something comes along that we can slow it down, but as of right now, it's looking to go the way of the ash tree, where we're going to be dealing with major forest devastation. Wildlife habitat improvement projects are they coincide with a lot of the forest stewardship activities. From the Forest Service perspective, we're specifically looking at forest health, but like I said, that coincides right along with wildlife habitat. A lot of our threatened and endangered species are threatened and endangered because the habitats that they prefer are being pushed out for one reason or another. So by completing forest stewardship activities, as Betsy said, you could benefit a lot of threatened and endangered species either directly or indirectly. Forest restoration, something that our state lands group is working on. They have a plan to restore acres and acres of Atlantic white cedar in the Pinelands region. That's something that's been in the works for several years, and from what I hear, we're getting closer to moving forward. But as a private landowner, I see many people that are taking this task on themselves, whether it's blown down cedar or an old cedar swamp that was harvested maybe 80 years ago and just didn't regenerate the way it should have because it wasn't being maintained. So hardwood slashing and cutting out red maple and black gum, and then replanting with cedar. There are folks who are doing this and having really good success with it if you're dedicated. This certainly is not easy work, but it's important work to be done. And I think this is my last activity, but timber harvesting is an approved activity as long as all the regulations are followed. We work very closely with the consulting foresters, making sure that all wetlands and all T&E species are being considered when a harvest is taking place, and to make sure that the forest that we leave after the harvest comes back in a good, healthy state. So we work really hard with making sure that invasive species aren't coming back, and that the right species of trees are coming back. And this is just a slide on only a few reasons to manage your forest. I think between myself and Betsy, we've touched on a lot of different reasons why to manage your forest, but realistically, as a private landowner, it'll come down to your own personal goals and how you want to see your forest left, into the future. I would say that whatever your goals are, be sure to discuss those with your consulting forester. And if you're making changes with your forest stewardship plan, or if something changes through the course of your plan, like you have a bad storm come through and knock down a bunch of trees and you need to change your objectives, it's definitely important to talk with your consulting forester, see what that means, see if you need to amend your plan possibly to make sure that you're on the right track. So here's the list of our regional offices and the areas that they cover. I would like to note that we do have 2 new forester trainees that have recently started, Brianna in the northern region and Anthony in the central region. But any of us would be happy to speak with you and answer questions that you have about any of this. The process for getting a forest stewardship plan would be you could always contact us, but you have to contact the consulting forester to prepare the plan for you, get the plan written, and then we move on from there. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. And if you have questions, I will be happy to answer.
Well, there's a bunch of questions and comments in the chat.
Hey,
So,
Rich, before
yeah.
we start there, I just want to ask 2 questions to clarify with Mike and Betsy. There was a question with regard to amount of acreage that you have to be able to get funding for NRCS project. And I just wanted to clarify. So, Mike, with regard to that 5 acres, that's for a forest stewardship plan or forest management plan for tax purposes. But effectively, if you had a smaller acreage and you wanted to have a forest management plan, you just couldn't take advantage of the tax program.
So for forest stewardship specifically, you need a minimum of 5 acres of woodlands. But if you're looking at it from the tax purposes perspective, you just need to have 5 acres actively devoted to agriculture. So if you have a mixed use property that is 3 acres field and 2 acres of woods, you could certainly have a woodland management plan prepared for those 2 acres of woods that'll bring together all 5 acres that you can prove to your local tax assessor that all of that land is actively devoted and eligible for farmland assessment. And also from time to time, we do have larger forest properties that they don't need it for the tax break, but they know that it's the appropriate thing to do, and they get a plan anyway, even though they're not using it for those tax purposes.
Okay, thank you. So Betsy, what is the minimum acreage for some of the NRCS programs?
So we don't have a minimum acreage for our programs. The only program that has minimum acreage is our Wetlands Reserve Easement Program, where we're purchasing an easement, and we have a 10-acre minimum for that program.
Okay, thank
Is
you.
there a time that you must be under a plan in order to be eligible? Is it 1 year? Is there a time period?
No, there isn't a time period. So plans are typically 10 years long, and you can apply at any point within those 10 years. And what we often have people doing is if they've already say they're in year 7, our contracts are usually 3 to 5 years in length. So if you're in year 7 of your plan, you can enroll for the next 3 years. And then when you're getting close to when you need a new plan, then you can actually apply for funds to get that new plan written.
And Mike, you have to be actively devoted for 2 years before you can file for a farmland assessment?
So you have to start filing right away, and then you have to file for 2 years before you get the abatement.
And then looking at, you had asked a question about counties. If you scroll into the chat, you'll see a whole bunch in there.
Yeah.
Sussex, Cape May.
Yeah, it seems like
Camden,
a lot of these are my folks, which is cool.
Mhm.
Monmouth, which is a town, borough of Roosevelt, and Middlesex. It's really, it's a broad group.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. There's an interesting question here on prescribed burn. Do you do a risk assessment for protecting animals before you do a prescribed burn?
So I don't work for New Jersey Forest Fire Service. So to answer that fully and wholly, I don't know. But I do know that the way that they generally burn properties, they usually start with a low backing fire, which will start to consume fuel away from their fire break slowly. So that way, when they start the remainder of the fire, it'll come up to the black, they call it, and it will not allow that fire to go any further because there's nothing left to burn. But with that, you have to know that you have brush trucks in there, guys walking around, guys running around, starting to light the fire. The Pinelands is a fire adapted ecosystem. So these animals, they're used to fire. Maybe not this generation, but it's inherently tuned for them to escape that danger. Turtles and snakes and different things, they'll get into their burrows, and specifically for prescribed burning, most of the time it's not consuming much more than the top 2 to 3 inches of duff. So those animals that can't move as quickly, they burrow under the soil and they're just fine. It's amazing to me because it's not what I do every day. But if you go to a prescribed burn, a couple hours later, if you put your hand on the soil where it was consumed, it's almost cool to the touch again. It's not the prescribed burning that is affecting animals. It's the catastrophic wildfires that are moving so quickly that animals don't have time to escape, or their escape routes are cut off.
That's pretty much the identical answer we received from the Forest Service during the Woodland Stewards program, right, John?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can add that most prescribed burns are done in a dormant season when the animals are typically hibernating anyway. So there's really no risk to worry about. There's only about 30 to 32 days in a year that actually are suitable for a prescribed fire. And again, most of those days come in the time of year when it's a dormant season for animals. I also will add that I worked a 1 acre fire in the Chesapeake Bay on an island down that way that actually burned rather hot and then continued to burn underground for 2 weeks. And the most interesting thing that I found about that is we were constantly finding frogs, salamanders, and even deer in the area where the soil was still under fire, and they were alive and well. And it was pointed out by my supervisor. He's like, "Well, heat rises." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right."
So there is a question here about income limits for EQIP.
I
know there's a form that has a breakpoint of $900,000 on it.
That's your answer. Yep. But yeah, so Susan's question about is what is the current income limit? So the adjusted gross income payment limit eligibility is $900,000 per year. So
I'm just checking to see if we have any other open questions. There was a question early on. Do you also provide input to individual townships who might be in the process of revising their master plans?
So although individual townships are generally not eligible to apply for our programs, we can definitely provide them technical assistance. And if they were interested in us providing input to their plans, that is something that we could do. We do, however, have some municipalities working with either a farmer that leases land on municipal land, or setting up a lease with a nonprofit organization, and then those entities are eligible to apply for our program. So we sometimes do have municipal and state land enrolled in our programs through a lease of a eligible entity.
Somebody just made a joke. There's no danger of me meeting the upper limit.
Yep.
So,
Unfortunately, yeah. I wish I could say I didn't need it either. But.
So does anybody have any wrap-up comments?
I just want to add quickly. So I'm sitting here quietly just because I helped coordinate this discussion today, and I joined in just to make sure everything would go well. And I work for Cape Atlantic Conservation District. The conservation districts were formed in New Jersey back with legislation 1936, 1937. And there are currently 14 conservation districts throughout the state. I'm working in the Cape Atlantic district. The conservation districts are actually getting into providing forestry services. We're actually in a capacity building stage right now. I'm working on a plan currently in Atlantic County. Very interesting property, which is actually about 20 acres and has an Atlantic white cedar swamp through it. The one thing I wanted to point out is in the history of the Pine Barrens and southern New Jersey, there's been, well, New Jersey as a whole, but in particular across the Pine Barren area, there's been a lot of exploitation and degradation. That has basically left the landscape in less quality than it was when Europeans actually settled in the area. Case in point, this one area that I'm walking through has remnants of a very nice Atlantic white cedar swamp. Unfortunately, you have a lot of hardwoods that are growing in. There's some spotty invasive species in the area. But most importantly, you don't get the kind of regeneration that should be happening in an area that's ideal for this very important tree species to be growing. And it's actually near the headwaters of a very important river system that empties into Delaware Bay. So that's one of the reasons for, the programs that are in place is to try to help rehabilitate these type of areas to get them back to where they should be. And another thing as well, with regard to bobwhite quail, for those of you in South Jersey that may have remembered, I know in the 80s, 90s, latest I heard bobwhite quail, but we used to have coveys that used to run all over my neighborhood down here in the Pine Barrens of Camden County. And they are basically extirpated in the state, meaning they're effectively extinct within New Jersey. Now, there's some populations down in Salem, Cumberland County, but there's a lot of stocking that goes on too. But the whole idea is, among other things that have happened, one of the primary things is loss of habitat. And that's actually expanding now into other areas as well. the whole plight for bobwhite quail is actually becoming a more important issue regionally as well. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to raise attention to. So.
We learned a lot tonight, and what we also learned was that the people who do these things are incredibly dedicated. And so as an audience, we can really appreciate the efforts that these folks make, and they're here on their own time tonight, educating us, and they take their jobs very seriously. And so, you know, it's a great partnership that we have with all these organizations, and there's a tremendous amount of resource available to landowners and just anybody interested in forests. And so this has been a tremendous evening, and I thank you all for attending, and I wish everyone a good night.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Betsy. Thanks, Mike. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.